Something just shifted here in Africa's digital landscape. And I can tell you, Western tech giants, they are watching this closely. A brand new data center went live in Bamako, Mali, just last week, right in the heart of the Sahel. Now, this isn't just another government tech announcement, okay? What's actually happening here is Mali is saying, we're taking back control of our digital future. We're pulling our most sensitive government data off overseas servers and we're keeping it here at home. So, on the last day of January, just a few days ago, during the country's digital week, the government opened what they are calling a Tier 3 data center. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it's built to stay running almost all the time. Even if there's maintenance happening or the power goes out, it will continue running. We're talking about uptime in the high 90s percentage wise. Now, this is where national databases are going to live. E-government services, critical systems, not in Paris, not in Virginia, but right here in Bamako. And here's what made it really significant. Leaders from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, the three countries in what they call the Alliance of Sahel States, they showed up together, standing side by side at the ceremony. That's a deliberate signal. This isn't just about better internet or faster services. No, it's a direct move away from a pattern that's been going on for decades, where Western and French tech companies have been hosting African data, and that has left the region exposed to surveillance, to outside control, to vulnerability. But honestly, this isn't about more than cables and servers. It's about power, control. Who gets to decide what happens to Africa's information? And that reaction, you're seeing massive enthusiasm across pan African circles and diaspora communities. At the same time, people are already asking harder questions about what this is actually going to cost. Now, politically, financially, and environmentally. Now, so let's talk through what happened here. How the military led governments in the alliance pulled this off, why the rest of the world was putting pressure on them, and why this could actually shift how Africa handles its digital power. Crowds showed up in Bamako on January 31st for Digital Week. And at the center of everything was this new data center. It's high end, built to tier 3 standards, which, as I mentioned, means it's designed to nearly uninterrupted uptime backup systems, redundancy, the whole infrastructure. From day one, the plan is to move vital government databases here, e-government services too. That's a massive shift in a region where, for years, national information has been stored in Europe or the United States. When data is sitting overseas like that, you lose control over access. You've got latency issues, or I should say delays. Services are slower for people on the ground. You are dependent on foreign companies and foreign infrastructure. Now, the atmosphere at the launch was charged. Ministers from Burkina Faso and Niger were actually there. Senior digital officials from both countries standing with Mali's leadership. It showed how these governments in the alliance see this as a shared project, a step towards what they are calling a digital independence, not just for Mali, for the entire bloc. These are governments that have recently broken with their old Western alliances. And now they are forming local data storage as a key piece of real sovereignty. They are saying we don't have to rely on foreign cloud providers anymore. We don't have to deal with their pricing. We don't have to worry about them being slow or, for lack of a better word here, politically influenced by their home governments. Now, locally hosted data promises faster services, better security, tighter control. But, and this is where it gets real, this is still a country and a region where power outages happen regularly. Now, data centers need massive amounts of power. They need water for cooling. So while the opening looked like a straight victory on the surface, there's actually a much more complicated picture underneath all of this. The Alliance of Sahel States wasn't formed in some boardroom deal. It started with military takeovers. Mali first, back in 2020. Then again, the following year, Burkina Faso with two changes in 2022, and Niger followed in mid-2023. Since then, these governments have united around a very clear message. No more Western sanctions dictating our policy. No more colonial-style influence. And they are pushing hard on self-reliance. In late 2023, they formalized the Alliance of Sahel States, and by mid-2024, they had upgraded it to a full confederation. This data center is becoming one of their flagship projects in that campaign. And it's not just about technology. It's about the infrastructure needed to actually support real independence. Think about what else they are building together. Let's think about that for a moment. Just 1 week before Mali's data center opened, around January 23rd, Burkina Faso inaugurated two mini data centers of its own. Niger is moving towards similar facilities. Back in late 2025, the alliance launched their own joint broadcaster, headquartered right here in Bamako. They are planning a shared satellite with the Russian Space Agency, joint biometric D systems, regional telecom links. All of these projects are building a digital space that doesn't depend on outside gatekeepers. The goal is straightforward. Keep data local. Control it yourself. Make regional services faster. Align everything with your own interests. Now, the momentum is real. Together, these countries are creating a network where Sahel data stays in the Sahel. That's a direct contrast to the old pattern, where African governments had to use foreign telecoms and cloud services. Your information back then was vulnerable. It could be surveilled. It could be manipulated by foreign actors. But the unity on display at the launch was noticeable. Digital ministers crossing borders, presenting a united front. And for supporters of this alliance, this is exactly what regional integration is supposed to look like. A collective effort to break free from old dependencies and build something new from the scratch. And this whole thing has earned loud support from Pan-African communities and diaspora audiences. They see these governments as trailblazers. But at the same time, and this is very important, questions are starting to come up about who's really backing these projects behind the scene. Behind Mali's digital keep, what you are seeing is depending and deepening ties with countries in the East, especially Russia, who stepped in to fill the gaps left after Mali and its allies cut ties with France and Western partners. Russian involvement is visible at multiple levels. Military cooperation, the shared satellite plans with the Russian Space Agency, Back in 2023, Russia and Mali signed an agreement to build a gold refinery in Bamako. Construction started in mid-2025. All of this strongly suggests similar support for digital infrastructure. Though, I should note, full details on the data centers, financing, and construction partners are not made public. This is a clear strategic pivot. By cutting ties with French-led operators and moving away from Western cloud services, the alliance is building a model where data stays in the Sahel. It's not routed through Europe or the US anymore. That means fewer risks of foreign access, less surveillance, more control over how informations get used. The government has framed this as a smart move. They've turned international isolation into an opportunity by partnering with countries that are not trying to impose political conditions. For many Pan-African voices, it's a symbolic win here. African data hosted by African states, with support from what they call a multipolar world, not just from former colonial powers. But there are real concerns here. People are asking about transparency, about hidden backdoors in imported hardware, about over-reliance on a new set of power partners who have their own strategic interests. The technology is enabling an epic leap forward, no question. But it also raises questions about long-term control and whether this truly represents independence or just a different form of dependency. Still, for many in the region, the choice is clear. Better to partner with countries that don't have a colonial history than to remain tethered to the old powers. Right after the center opened in Bamako, social media across the region exploded. Pro-alliance channels on YouTube, on Telegram, local forums, they are all hailing this as a major sovereignty victory. A clear sign that the Sahel is turning the page on foreign digital dominance. Voices, videos, and posts racked up views very fast, especially among younger audiences and supporters in the diaspora. The narrative is strong and it's everywhere. African data staying in Africa on homegrown platforms, out of reach of Western surveillance. Nationalist voices on various platforms have been pushing this very hard. Short form video, long form commentary, they are full of clips celebrating the technology and the unity of these alliance leaders. For a lot of people, this isn't just about a building with servers. It's about a new era. Digital pride. And inside the region, the energy feels real. Urban Malians especially are excited about the promise of faster government services, more reliable digital access. Influencers and online commenters are tying this data center to the bold stance of the military government, saying, this is what real independence looks like in the digital age. But there is a critical side too. Some observers are pointing to past internet shutdowns during protests and asking, will this new infrastructure be used to empower citizens or to tighten control? The official narrative here is loudly promoted. It's everywhere, but it's harder to hear dissenting voices in that space. What this online firestorm really shows is how the government and allied leaders are using digital tools to shape public opinion. Young creators, video teams, they've turned the launch into viral content. They are sustaining the revolutionary momentum. But while the social media hype is strong, it also masks some of the real world challenges, especially the huge environmental and energy demands of running a facility like this is one of the world's most climate vulnerable regions. Running a tier 3 data center is energy intensive. It needs constant, reliable power. It needs significant amount of water just to keep the servers cool. In a country like Mali, which already faces droughts, water scarcity, and unreliable electricity grids, that's a serious challenge. Cooling systems alone can consume massive amounts of water. Some data centers globally use, well, enormous quantities annually. The servers themselves need steady electricity, and that's hard to guarantee when outages are very common. The official launch celebrated the technical achievements, but it didn't really dive into these environmental and infrastructure costs. If the power supply is unstable, the center could be forced to rely on expensive diesel backup generators. That's both costly and environmentally damaging. Or it could face downtime, which would defeat the whole purpose of having a sovereign data center in the first place. Your data might be home. If the servers can't stay on, what's the whole point? Water scarcity is another major concern. Data centers in regions put pressure on resources that are already strained. That can hit nearby communities the hardest. And there hasn't been clear public information about how this project is being tied to any large-scale renewable energy plants. The Alliance has its own development bank funding that are funding regional infrastructure. But the renewable energy piece, that is not clear yet. The government argue that this is necessary for sovereignty. They are saying the short-term environmental costs are outweighed by the long-term strategy benefits. For many Pan-African supporters, the priority here is very clear. Sovereignty over data is more urgent than immediate environmental concerns. But critics are warning that this could be short-sighted, especially if power failures or water shortages start affecting the facility's reliability. Environmental sustainability and digital sovereignty don't have to be enemies. But right now, in this very moment, it's not clear how Mali plans to balance both. So, while the environmental challenges are real, there's another consequence that's actually explosive. This move is a direct threat to long-standing Western digital dominance. And that dominance is already responding. By keeping data local, the Alliance of Sahel States is cutting its dependence on Western tech giants and major telecom providers. That means less business for big cloud companies. The major American platforms, less influence for Western telecom firms that used to dominate access and control over data flows. These regional governments are basically saying here, we're bringing our information home. Services will be faster. The risk of foreign surveillance goes down. Our sovereignty goes up. Now, France's main telecom operator used to have significant presence in Mali. American-based companies manage cloud services across the region. Now, they are seeing a shift in how Sahel governments manage their digital systems. The expulsion of French military from the region has already made it harder for those old partnerships to continue. And now, this data center is another layer of that new reality. Local hosting means fewer points where outside actors can easily access or interfere with African data. The isolation strategy from the West African region bloc is starting to look less effective. The bloc tried to isolate these junted governments through sanctions and diplomatic pressure. But the Alliance Sahel States is building its own alternatives: telecoms, news agencies, data hubs, satellite systems. This is positioning the region as an emerging digital center on its own terms, not as a client of foreign systems. For supporters, especially in the diaspora, this is a moment of validation. This is proof that a multipolar approach can deliver real results where Western promises often fell short. The fact that other countries might start copying this model adds even more pressure on the old powers. Of course, there are contradictions here. The lack of transparency about who exactly is funding and building the infrastructure, that worries some observers who fear a simple swap of masters, one foreign power for another, Russian influence instead of French influence, Chinese tech instead of American tech. For many people, especially younger Africans, the gains in control and agency are more important than those doubts. They are arguing that at least these new partners don't have a colonial history in the region. At least the relationship feels more transactional and less paternalistic. And this is starting to set a precedent that could pull other sympathetic nations into the alliance orbit. Countries watching from across the continent are asking, could we do this too? Mali's data center isn't just a national project. It's being presented as the start of a wider trend. And the Alliance of Sahel States is trying to build a digital ecosystem that other African countries could follow. Local data centers, shared satellites, regional news agencies, biometric system, all under African control. This fits into broader continental visions, like the African Union's long-term agenda, which call for economic sovereignty through homegrown infrastructure. For Pan-African audiences, this is being seen as a powerful blueprint, a clear example of how small, determined blocks can stand up to global digital giants and build their own systems. The hope is that this could spark a domino effect. More countries moving critical data home, creating regional hubs, using digital tools to drive growth, creating jobs for young people, and reduce dependency on foreign tech monopolies. There are real risks, no question. The energy and water demands we talked about, the question about partner control and transparency, the ever-present fear that surveillance infrastructure could be used to tighten government control rather than empower citizens. Past internet shutdowns during protests are a reminder that digital infrastructure is politically neutral. It's how governments use it that matters here. But for supporters, the upside is huge. A more secure, faster, more independent digital future for Africa. The ability to process sensitive data without foreign intermediaries. The economic benefits of keeping digital services and revenue streams on the continent. Now, what this really means is it's no longer just about access or affordability. It's about who holds the keys to the digital age. The Alliance of Sahel States is showing that even small, precious states can challenge the old order and build a different kind of future. It's inspiring a new sense of possibility, not just for the Sahel, for the whole continent. The question here isn't whether Africa should pursue digital sovereignty. It's how to do it sustainably, transparently, and in ways that genuinely benefit citizens rather than just consolidating government power. So, where does this leave us? Mali just opened a state of an art data center. Burkina Faso opened two the week before. Niger is planning its own. Together, they are building a digital network that keeps Sahel's data in the Sahel. They are partnering with Russia and potentially other non-Western powers to make it happen. They are framing it as digital independence, and huge swaths of pan-African social media are celebrating. But the environmental costs are real. The infrastructure challenges are serious. The transparency questions are very much legitimate. And the risk that this becomes a tool for control rather than liberation, that's something citizens and observers will need to watch carefully. Still, something fundamental is shifting. Africa's digital future is being written right now. And for the very first time in a long time, Africans themselves, at least some of them, are holding the pen. Whether this becomes a model for the continent or a cautionary table, that depends on what happens next. This is Frontline Africa. If this kind of unfiltered Africa First analysis resonates with you, make sure you are subscribed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. Are we witnessing digital independence or just a new form of dependency? Let's talk about it. My name is Peace Solomon. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.